Marian?
Yes.
So, before we started this morning, one of the things that we did is we just took a few minutes to see what was our intention for today. And we want to share that with you. And Marian is going to start. So go ahead, Marian.
Apparently I am. So really what I would love for today is that where in the past you may have seen challenge or difficulty in your dealing with change, you will start to feel a sense of hope and opportunity. And that what I have noticed with that for myself is that only a little bit of that can go a very long way.
And what I'm hoping is that you get amazed at the ability that you have to experience change. I am just thrilled to be sharing some things with you. We will be sharing some things with you in just a few minutes. But for me, in the process of preparing and learning and researching and discovering our ability to deal with change, what happened to me was like, whoa, we got this. We know how to deal with change, because that's the only thing that we have been dealing with since we were born and before. So those are our intentions. Thank you for being here. And we will begin. Marian, do you want to begin?
No, but what I wanted to do is just to say that it's a joy to see all your faces and to know that you've taken the time this evening, afternoon, morning to be with us. So thank you, and a big welcome to all of you.
Okay, great. So one of the things that we wanted to explain to you is that today, and our program is not focused on how to deal with change. So that's not what we're doing. What we are doing is we are hoping to present an understanding and a program that allows you to experience change completely differently. So this is a bit radically different from everything that's out there, because just from our research, a lot of the programs that are out there will help you to deal with change, but from a paradigm that positions change as difficult and uncomfortable. So how many of you have experienced change and have really struggled at one point or another, or looked at a change that was coming your way, that was imposed, and were really resistant to it? You can raise your hand. Yes. So, we all have an experience and an idea that change is difficult. It's undesirable. It can be painful, right? And so Marian and I got really curious about this. And we got really curious about this because, well, the last 2 years, right? In the last 2 years, there has been so many changes in everybody's life that this became like a very personal journey for us. So we wanted to understand, why is it that human beings experience change as difficult and uncomfortable? And we came up with a couple of realizations. The first realization is that there is a paradigm. Now, a paradigm is just a story. It's an idea. And this paradigm that we have of change positions change as undesirable. And so I don't know if the last 2 years you've heard people say, well, yeah, change is difficult. Have you heard people say that? Or have you said that to another person? Change is difficult. Okay, right. So there is a story that has been told worldwide, apparently, that we have all bought into. And the story says change is difficult, it's undesirable, and it's painful. And we have bought it, not consciously, not purposefully, but it's become a truth to most of us, most of the time. And this paradigm, this story, this idea is so pervasive that it transcends cultures and ages and languages and genders. So I want to take a moment here to appreciate how powerful this idea has become for all of us. And this is the idea that most programs about change is based on. That's the premise, right? So, you know, we're calling it an idea, we're calling it a story, we're calling it a paradigm, but I have been profoundly surprised to the depth and reach that this idea holds in my world. And so it's interesting because it's invisible, but it's accepted as a truth. And so that's the first thing that we wanted kind of to bring to light. Marian, would you like to add anything?
Yes. So building on that, what if we look online, for example, for change programs, the words that we're going to find are how to manage change, dealing with it, almost from the premise, and I've done this myself when I have delivered programs on change in organizations, the techniques that we have to use to deal with it, to in some way control what's happening. And this is all in a way confirming that paradigm that change is something that's undesirable and that needs to be managed. And
how much is
129? We're getting some background noise. And that is confirming or giving some evidence to that paradigm, that current paradigm, that we've got this change that is alien and somehow difficult. And the truth is that when we go through change, we can feel uncomfortable. It can be, we can feel uncomfortable, we can have challenging times. And the question is, though, is it the change that's causing that? Or is it the narrative that's going on in our own minds about the change that is causing the feeling of discomfort and difficulty? So this is where we want to go now. Like, why is it? So if we feel like that, why is it that we feel like that? And what's happening under the radar that's invisible and that is causing our feelings of discomfort that we then assign to the change? And in a way, we reinforce the idea that of this paradigm that change is difficult.
So we have a habit, we humans have a habit, and the habit is we attribute discomfort or comfort to the outside. And this happens to us during change, right? So, for example, if I were to get on the road and I were to experience a lot of traffic and I start experiencing frustration, what am I going to attribute my experience of frustration to? The traffic, right? I have been dealing with Canva recently. I don't know if you know what Canva is. Canva is a company, I'm sure they're very good. And they have a lot of photographs and it's a wonderful company. So I downloaded one photograph and I paid for it. Not a lot, just $1. But then a second later, I couldn't download it without the watermarks, right? So I'm like, okay, let me just write down. All of a sudden, I started noticing such level of frustration. And without intending, because this happens all the time, I attributed my frustration to the fact that this was happening with this particular company. And then there was a moment where the dialogue, the mental dialogue became very visible to me. And the dialogue was something like, this should not be happening. Why is this happening? How am I going to get this thing done? Blah, 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 blah. So as human beings, we do that all the time. We have a mental story that is created through thought, and that most of the time is invisible. And this is why we experience frustration, or why we experience calmness, or why we experience resistance, or why we experience openness. And that happens also when we are experiencing change. It's the habit that we have to attribute our experience of life to externals. And so, as Marian was saying, when we experience stress or difficulty or pain during periods of time, when we experience stress during periods of change, what we do is what we do with everything else. We attribute that to the fact that things are changing. Does that make sense, this last point? Okay, all right. So then we have what we're calling the nailing of the coffin. And this is what we mean. We have a paradigm that positions change as difficult, uncomfortable, and undesirable. Then we experience discomfort while we're experiencing change. And so the next logical step is, see, change is difficult. So when that happens, we just assume that the paradigm that we have about change is a fact, when in reality, it's just a story or an idea that we have all bought into. Do you guys have any questions or any comments up to this point? No, you're okay? All right, good, okay. Marian, would you like to add anything at this point?
The only other thing that I often hear, and I have found myself saying at times, is this, I'm not good with change. And that's something else that can be also a story that we tell ourselves when we are struggling, when we are feeling uncomfortable, and that conclusion that we are not good at dealing with it, again reinforces. It's a big nail on the coffin, because then it's us that are a problem when we face change.
Right. Thank you. So now we want to do an exercise with you. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask you a question, and we want you to use the chat to respond. Okay? Are you ready? Okay. So the question is, we want you to reflect on a time where you experienced change, maybe at work, or maybe with health policies, right? Or maybe with a personal situation, where you did not know what to do at first. So reflect on a time when you had to experience change. Maybe it was self-imposed, and you came on the change, and you had no idea as to what you should do. So we're going to do like 15 seconds so you can reflect on that. Okay, now what we want is we want you to put in the chat, what are some of the thoughts or ideas or experiences that you went through during that period? So Sheila, do you want to read them out? No? Sheila goes, no, I don't want to read them out. So Deborah says anger and frustration, fear and nervousness. John? Lots of fear of the unknown. Lots of options. She's seen a lot of options to choose from. Were you going to say something, Maria?
Yes, from Verena, anxiety and insecurity. Stress and fear.
So stress and fear, confusion, high anxiety, uncertainty, confusion. Oh, Karina, this is interesting, but excitement too. Great. Shannon says, where I teach confusion, difficulty sleeping. Yes. How many people have had difficulty sleeping when we're going through a change and we're, yeah, exactly. Overeating or undereating, that's not something that's here, or drinking. Maybe some people do drink during these periods of times, not me, but some other people, right? Confusion, overthinking, all this stuff that happens. Okay, now, part 2 of the exercise. What happens after a while? Same experience, right? So you come to the point where like you don't know what to do, or maybe it was a change that was imposed all of a sudden, and you get frustrated and anxious, you can't sleep, all this stuff. But after a while, what happens to us? You can use the chat. Just use the chat to tell us. Do you want to read it, Maria?
Yeah, Rose says, after a while, I start to enjoy the change and the new way of being. Karen says, we adapt. And Linda, a gradual return to calm and certainty. Karina, move to action, taking steps in direction that looks right. Ilva, more stress and anger, feeling trapped. Deborah, acceptance. John, I feel more relaxed. Judy says, I get over it, I have fresh ideas. And Jonelle, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Verena, I settled a bit, my thinking cleared more and more, I could see some possibilities. A next step.
Great.
Oh, and Betty says, figured out what the steps to take.
Yes.
Isn't it interesting that how different our reactions can be, or what happens afterwards can be for us? It just strikes me that also when I was reflecting on people that I've been speaking to and working with, how some people will go through change and you will see they will almost thrive on it. Whereas other people kind of will feel more sticky around it at times, but also how that can change, right? That we can feel so stuck around change, and then what you've been writing here, the contrast between the initial experience of change and then how it can change to feeling excited and having ideas and getting comfortable and all of that. It just, that makes me really question that paradigm that change is difficult, because how can it be that the experience can change so radically, and also that different people can experience it so differently?
So this is actually one of the things that made us curious. So we want to tell you just briefly about our journey. You know, Marian and I have been, as Sheila said, we've been working with people for many, many years. And when we work with people around change. Like generally, our clients want change, either because they want it themselves or because their change has been imposed in one way or another. And Marian and I have seen tremendous transformations actually that we thought they were impossible. And also we have seen struggle with our clients. And so we've seen both. It seems like human beings experience struggle at times during change, and also tremendous transformation and adaptation and flexibility and openness. Most recently, in the last 2 years, when Marian and I decided to work together, we had just a little tiny issue. We live in different time zones. So we actually have a very short window of time when we're both awake, right? And this presented some challenges in the way that we worked, right? So because we are in separate time zones, we had to figure out a way to collaborate. How many of us have that issue now, that we have had to find ways to collaborate with the people that we work with because we're working remotely? Is that a common experience for all of us right now, right? To be perfectly honest, at one point, I just was convinced that what I did, I couldn't do remotely, because all of my experience was face-to-face. So this was a point of resistance for us. So we had a conversation with a client, a prospective client, last May. And one of the things that we both, Marian and I, got touched by was that this particular prospective client had a dynamo team. It was like, they are talented, they're experienced, they are the bomb. But she said, you know, but they're going to have to get on with all the changes that are going to have to come our way. And that is going to be tricky. And so we were really touched at that point, because what we realized is that in today's working world, we are continuously experiencing change. And of course, this last 2 years has given us like an ultra fast experience of change. And so we wanted to investigate, we wanted to research, because we had experienced change personally, because we started collaborating together. We had experienced seeing our clients go through change, and then we were experiencing this prospective client and other clients that we have having to deal with change in such rapid way. So here we went on a little learning and exploration and researching over the last year, and we want to present just very briefly some of the things that we found, because they are extraordinary. Do you want to say something, Marian?
Well, probably just to illustrate what you're talking about, Gabriela. So all of you, like us, in the last 2 years have gone through big changes. And the one that strikes me that was probably more impactful for me was when the pandemic started and we went into lockdown, and suddenly I'm self-employed. Most of my work is face-to-face, and suddenly that work stopped. It literally, and many of you will have been in a similar situation from one day to the next one. And I had always feared something like that would happen, but at the back of my mind, I was like, well, really, how could it? And then it did. And it was very interesting to look at how I experienced that, because I really had some moments of terror. And then I had some moments when I was perfectly okay. But what did happen was very much what you have said in the chat, was that after that, little by little, I started to have ideas of how I could deal with that change. That came from nowhere that I could identify. Things like, just as you were saying, Gabriela, how am I going to manage work online? Do I need to learn? Maybe I need to learn how to use Zoom differently. I could get in touch with old clients, see how they're doing, because they are stuck at home the same as I am. So maybe there's a possibility to do something different. So that's in our research, what we started to find was that there seems to be a natural ability, or there is a natural ability that sometimes we don't recognize because it looks like it's because the current paradigm almost overtakes change is difficult, but that natural ability takes care of little by little moving us in the direction of dealing with that change, even if the change is undesirable.
Yes, a desirable change, which is something that we all have had to deal with these last 2 weeks, right? We've all had to, I mean, I don't know if you had to cancel trips, cancel projects, learn how to be at home, acquire new responsibilities at work. I know there's somebody in this call, she's really dear to me, and I'm always in awe of her ability to manage all the changes that come her way, right? Because they are mandated by the county. And so jokingly we say, well, she's become a nurse, like a school nurse, because there's like one emergency after another emergency after another emergency after another emergency. And yet this person, I've known her personally, for 30 years, and I have seen in her this capacity that we all have to get present and deal with what's in front of us. So this next part is so exciting to me, just forgive me, but what we're going to do is we're going to present to you 4 areas: the biological, developmental, anthropological, and psychological. 4 of the areas that we experience change in, and I hope that you get amazed in the way that we did. So in the biological area, we are going to start at the beginning, at the very beginning. So how many cells does it take for a human to begin? Do you know? 2. Thank you, Deborah. It takes 2. This is true universally. Like the people in Mexico that have babies, they need those 2 cells, and the people in China need 2 cells, and the people in Spain, and the people in the Arctic, we all begin like this with 2 cells. Do you know how many cells we end up by birth? Do you have any idea? If you know, put it in the chat. This is just unbelievable. No, nobody knows. Billions, yes, 26 billion cells. And an adult has trillions of cells, right? So we go from the very beginning with 2 cells, and in 9 months, we end up with an average of 26 billion. This is rapid change at its best. Now, by around day 5 or 6, these cells start developing into different types of cells, okay? So that's when we're in vitro. Now, every minute of our lives, we shed somewhere between 30 and 40,000 skin cells. This is continuous. I don't think about it. You don't think about it. This is just what happens naturally. And every 2 to 4 weeks, we shed the entire outer layer of our skin. Did you know that? And this is without you having to put it in the calendar as a task. This is just sort of something that happens. Our heart is in continuous movement. So per day, it beats 1,000 times a day. And it pumps 2,000 gallons every single day. This is fantastic. This I just was like, what? So every second of the day, our body makes 2 million new red cells. 2 million new red cells every single second of the day. During our sleep, right? What we are recognizing and discovering is that there are so many changes in our brain. And one of the changes that happens is that all the memory of the day gets actually consolidated. What I love about this, Mariana and Sheila are like, oh my God, you want this thing one more time. But what I love about this is that this is universally happening for every single human being, and that we don't have to think about it because it is just something that naturally happens for all of us. Developmentally, at 2 months, we begin to recognize people and we begin to act bored at 2 months. At 6 months, we show curiosity. At a year, we are able to follow simple directions. At 4 years, we can start telling what's going to happen next in a storyline book. And in adolescence, we become self-involved and appearances are very important for us. This is true for some adults as well. Anthropological. 800,000 years ago, we were able to control fire. The human brain evolved most rapidly between 800 and 200,000 years ago. We migrated out of Africa between 50 and 60,000 years ago, and today we actually habitate every continent on Earth. So we have been in movement from the very beginning. Psychologically, we can see our moods, opinions, feelings, and ideas change constantly. We can be in a good mood in the morning and in a terrible mood in the afternoon, or even a second later. We can change our opinions about going for a glass of wine or going for Chinese. We can like something or dislike something without really any change outside. Without really any change in the circumstance. We are able to continuously experience the world differently. We are able to adapt to situations like we have. The whole entire world has adapted to the situation that came our way these last 2 years. And we're able, this is the most fascinating one for me at this point, is like, and we're able to feel secure or insecure even when nothing changes outside. We can be like me, like through this conversation, there are moments where I feel like very present and very secure, and there's moments where I get nervous. And this is a common experience. So looking at all of these changes, what we realize is from birth, what we are is change in action. And it's not a change that we have to focus on. It's not a change that we have to get good at. It is just what we are. I love to hear what's landing for you, or I want to hear if there is something about these facts that touch you, or what do you think about this so far? And you can use the chat.
Deborah says, we are in constant change and need to stop fighting it.
Yeah, I think that is the fundamental discovery. It's like we are in constant change. And so isn't it interesting that that's what we are? Biologically, psychologically, developmentally, anthropologically. And we have this funny idea about resistance. There's another comment, Marian.
Yes, Karina says, just saying how commonplace change is, yet we build up certain changes as special. I guess we notice it and make the story up around it. Wow, that's great. And Verena says, looks like we are well equipped to deal with change.
Mm-hmm. There's one more, Marian.
Yes, I think this is Deborah. I think you're saying that the magic key is how we react to change. We can control our reaction by telling a different story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need to understand that we are telling a story that it's uncomfortable and desirable, but it's just an idea and it's inaccurate. That's the part that I was really like, oh, hold on. It's not only that we're not telling a story that it's, like uncomfortable and undesirable, but it's inaccurate. Because if you start paying attention, all the evidence out there points to the fact that we are perfectly capable and able to deal with change. That's what we are. We are change in action constantly, right? So we had these questions, Marian and I. We were like, hold on a second. How is it that we are change in action and yet we have this resistance to it? How did we develop such story? One of the important questions around us developing a program was, how can we really develop effective strategies when the basis of our paradigm is not accurate and it's positioned as difficult, right? If we're working to solve a problem, but we think of the problem in an inaccurate way, we are never going to find a sustainable solution. So we had some realizations. Do you want to go through it, Maria?
Well, for me, probably the one that struck me the most, and I remember it every time you talk about the two cells, so you always start like that, right? Is that gosh, change is life. Life is change. It just never stops wherever we look, and interesting that we then think we're not good at it, right? So for me, the biggest realization is that effortlessly change is happening and we are dealing with it. And sometimes we make up a story about our discomfort that we may experience during change or without change. Sometimes we feel uncomfortable as well. And then we give it to the change. We say, it's because this happened that I am feeling like this. But for me, that's the biggest realization, how well equipped we are, and how, coming back to the story about COVID, when we had the first lockdown and I couldn't work, and just noticing how little by little, one idea after the next one were useful and were helpful to assist me in dealing with that change. And for me, that was such a game changer, literally, to see how naturally well equipped we are.
Yeah, I think that is actually at the heart of this program. We need to realize how perfectly equipped we are to deal with change, because it is what we've experienced since the beginning when there were two cells. We haven't stopped, right? We have been evolving and evolving and evolving and evolving and evolving. And that's the only thing we've done, experience change. And fortunately, our ability to deal with it is innate and it's natural. So we want to invite you to reflect on the following, okay? So these are like the takeaways for this particular webinar. We're inviting you to reflect on the story that you have about the change process. And if you can, reflect on the reach that story has in your life, personally and professionally. We want you to reflect on the fact that it is common for us humans to come up with ideas that turn into beliefs, and then somehow they turn into the truth. And, it's not a bad thing. I think it's something we do. We will experience. We don't want you to change it or anything, but we want you to notice. We would want you to reflect on the fact that every single second of our lives, the only thing that we're experiencing is change at a biological, psychological level all the time. And we also want you to appreciate the ability that you have to deal with change with fluidity and creativity and with innovation, to be agile, to adapt. Because if these 2 years have brought us a gift, it's the gift of noticing that in real time. So that's what we wanted to share with you today. Point number 1 is there is a paradigm about change out there that it is pervasive, but it's inaccurate, and it positions change as undesirable. So any solution, any technique that you're coming up with from that perspective, it's not going to be sustainable because the basis of it is not accurate. And the point number 2 is realize how perfectly prepared you are to change. Do you want to add anything, Marian?
I think that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So the program that we have created, it's called Reimagining Change at Work. We want to look at this and why at work? Because most of us have to work, right? Like, raise your hand, we have to work, right? So at work, we spend a lot of time. We spend somewhere between 8-10 hours plus commute, so this is like most of the time we are at work. So if you are a solopreneur, or if you are a team leader that is leading a team through change, or you are part of a team that is experiencing change, or a volunteer, or if you have to work with people that are experiencing change, this program would be for you. we want to look at 6 things. We want to explore the power and impact that our current views have in our world, both personally and professionally. There is a term that we coined, and we happen to love it, and we are going to explore it in this program, and it's called listening from stillness. And the reason why we are talking about listening from stillness is because when we listen in this way, we are able to understand or to see what's the next step that we need to take. Maybe not the whole picture immediately, but what's the very next step? And listening from stillness is something that you can do by yourself or with another person. We also want to highlight the power of reflection. I think this is one of the things that we do poorly during periods of change and frustration, because we're trying to find a solution in our frustration, and we don't stop to clear our minds and see what shows up. And that's what we're calling the power of reflection. We are also going to talk about the nature of insight. Insight is something that we have every day, all the time, and it is what has allowed us to be so successful in going through all these changes. Now, the thing about insight is you can be stuck in confusion, and then all of a sudden an idea pops. You're like, oh, okay, I need to write Canva an email, right? But that's a simple insight. And finally, one of the things we noticed during our time of learning is that our mind recalculates all the time. So, like when you're you're going, from point A, point B, and then, right, Waze says, turn left, but you think, no, I know better, I'm going to turn right. And then all of a sudden it goes recalculating, recalculating, recalculating. Well, that is what our mind does every single moment of our day. It recalculates, right? Because we have the power to have insight. And this is really important. It's important for us to realize that we have that ability, particularly if we're working with teams. The last thing that we're going to be doing during this program is we're going to be talking about how can we identify things that are happening internally inside of us, roadblocks, so we can move forward and deal with what's exactly in front of us. So this is what we're going to be discussing during the program. We have an early bird, and the early bird finishes Valentine's Day, which is February 14th. We are going to be meeting for 6 Thursdays, all of March, and the first one in April. So if you are interested in discovering more, we would love to have you.